the business. Thanks for coming out tonight.
I wrote me a manual, a step-by-step booklet for you to get.
Oh, I make money moves.
You can't see me, my time is now.
What up, guys? Welcome back to the Fitness Times Business Podcast, the show created to provide you with the practical and strategic advice to help you level up in fitness, business, your career, your relationships, and your life. My name is Joseph Medsell. I am your host. Guys, I'm riding solo in this episode. Man, what a fucking start to 2022. I think I'm definitely not alone in thinking like we came into this year definitely kind of closing the door on 2021, coming into 2022, optimistic, hopeful, confident, and, pretty much just feeling like most of this pandemic-related bullshit was behind us. And it hasn't turned out that way. You know, we are less than a month into this new year, less than a month into 2022, and you know, the sorts of things that we're experiencing all over the world are just fucking mind-blowing at this point. Here in Australia, we have pretty much lockdowns again. They're not calling them lockdowns, but through the forced isolation of people testing positive for COVID and then their close contacts having to isolate and, you know, effectively putting us back in what is really lockdown situation, not as bad as it was in different stages of the pandemic, but effectively lockdowns. Here we are again. Supermarket shelves being empty again, product shortages left, right, and center, supply chains being fucking suffocated because of these effective lockdowns for the most part, stock markets falling again, and just really a complete fucking shit show. Is probably the best way that we can describe how 2022 has started. And I know for myself, what I have experienced is pretty much almost effectively a trauma response kicking back in, where I'm starting to go, this feels a lot like the start of 2020. All of these things kind of happened in 2020 that led to me experiencing a whole lot of trauma in different areas of my life and different degrees of trauma, of course. But my mind and my emotional state is going back to, you know what, I'm scared. I'm quite fearful of where this is heading, because this feels like something that happened a couple of years ago that was really uncomfortable for me, and I want to get as far away from this shit as I possibly can. And I know I'm not alone in feeling that, because everybody I talk to in person, everybody I talk to through DMs, when this topic comes up, we're all experiencing the same trauma response. We're all experiencing, fuck, 2020, here we go again. Or for some of us, 2021, here we go again. It's the same shit. It's a different year, and it feels really, really uncomfortable. And so I'm going to talk to you guys about what I have kind of anchored back into to help me deal with this trauma response and to help me kind of objectively work through everything that's happening at the moment and really kind of focus back on the things that I have control over. And I think, you know, the obviously by the name of this podcast, Control Your Controllables, the name of this episode, you guys know where this is going to head. But I think it's really important. It kind of goes without saying, but it does need to be said, that at this point, it's really important to start to separate what you can control, what's within your sphere of influence, what your controllables actually are, and then what you can't control, what's outside of your sphere of influence, what you really have, what your controllables are not. It's really important to make that distinction. And upon making that distinction, which we're about to dive into in this episode, it's really then important to have the serenity to accept what you cannot control, have the serenity to accept what's outside of your sphere of influence, and just go, you know what? I can't fight this. This is not a fight that I'm able to win, because I have no control. I have no influence over these uncontrollables, and just have the serenity to accept that, to go, you know what? I'm just going to have to accept these things that I cannot control. And then on the flip side, having the courage to control your controllables, having the courage to change what is within your sphere of influence, to have the courage to change what you can control. Really important to make that distinction, have serenity on one hand and then have courage on the other hand. What are your controllables? Let's dive in. What are we talking about here when I'm saying have the courage to change what you can control? There's 4 things, guys, and I've mentioned them a number of times in different episodes of this podcast, so this is going to come as no surprise to those of you who tune in. Actions, responses, effort, and attitude. Those are our 4 controllables. Those are the 4 things within our sphere of influence. Those are the things that no matter what happens regarding government directives, no matter what happens regarding medical directives, no matter what happens regarding anything to do with this pandemic, those 4 things are untouchable. Those 4 things are always within our control. Those are the 4 things that we need to exert courage towards because we can use them to change our personal paths. So let's dive in. Let's start with actions. What I'm talking about here when I say you can always control your actions is making sure that you're focusing on what you can do and you don't get too caught up in what you cannot do. What you cannot do outside of your sphere of influence, you need to have the serenity to accept. What you can do within your sphere of influence, you need to have the courage to act upon. So a couple of examples here is probably the best way to kind of tease this out is, let's say, for example, in your fitness, you're in isolation and so you can't go to the gym. You can't train. Don't get so caught up in the fact that you can't train, right? That's not an action that you have control over. What you do have control over is what you put in your mouth when it comes to your fitness. You can always control your diet. You can always control what you choose to eat, what you choose not to eat. That's a controllable. So that's an action that you always have control over, that you should always focus on controlling. Let's say in a business, let's say you run a business and perhaps you have these big sales growth plans for your business and you've been hit by supply chain issues or you've been hit by sales issues because your customers are all being locked down and they're not going out, not coming to your retail stores or not shopping online and buying your shit. You can't control your sales. That's outside of your control. But what you can control is your expenses. You always have control over the amount of money you're spending in your business. So focus on what you can control, have the courage to change your expenses, to reduce your expenses, and have the serenity to accept, you know what, at the moment, there's not much I can do from the sales end. I can't get enough stock to fulfill demand. It's going to be capped. Outside of my sphere of influence, let me focus on what's inside of my sphere of influence. Let's say in your work, you can't get traction with a current project that was going to be the main focus for you in Q1 2022. It's just not happening. All these disruptions, it's just, you know what? I just have to have the serenity to accept that this project is just, it's not happening right now. It's not going to happen in Q1 2022. You can still explore other projects. You can still go to your team leader or your manager and say, look, you know, this is not happening at the moment. What else can we focus on? How else can I spend my time, my effort, and my resources? Let's do that right now because we do have control over that. We can influence that. And then finally, with relationships, you know, for a lot of us, we can't, because of border restrictions and whatnot, we can't visit friends, we can't visit family. You know, perhaps we're in isolation and we can't fucking visit anybody. That's outside of our control. We can't do anything about it. What we can do is we can use this amazing technology that we have access to spend FaceTime with our friends and family instead of spending actual time with our friends and family. Focus on what we can control, have the serenity to accept what we cannot control. And I think from an actions perspective, it's quite interesting that this situation that we're all finding ourselves in at the moment is striking us at the beginning of the year, because I know, you know, a lot of us who are interested in personal development, who are trying to level up in all areas of our life, this is a big goal setting time of year for us as well. We spend a lot of time goal setting. We set these big, massive goals for the next year, maybe for the next 5 years. We've got these big plans in place, and what we thought we were going to be able to do to work towards these big goals, these big plans, is now really being disrupted by everything that's happening in the world at the moment. I think that when it comes to having the courage to control what you can control with regards to your actions, sometimes as well, guys, it's really important that part of having the serenity to accept what is outside of your sphere of influence is really breaking your goals down into, let me just take one step at a time. Let me just simplify this. Let me not consider the big picture right now, because it's a little bit too overwhelming. It's going to cause me a little bit too much anxiety because there's so much shit that I want to do that I can't do. Let's just strip it back. Let's strip it back to, what can I do today? What's the one step forward that I can take today? Now, I don't have to do everything right now. I probably can't do everything right now. Let me strip it back one step at a time. The second thing we can always control is our responses. And what I'm talking about here, guys, is you always have control over how you perceive and react to the things that are happening that you have no influence over. So when we have the serenity to accept what we cannot control, we always have control over how we perceive and how we react to those things that are outside of our sphere of control. And let me explain it like this. You can experience negative emotions around things that you can't do. You can get frustrated. You can get pissed off. You can get angry. You can feel helplessness. You can feel all of these sorts of negative emotions. And it's important to feel those negative emotions. It's really important not to go straight into, positive affirmations and, positive gratitude and all of this shit, when what you're actually doing is bottling up all of these negative emotions that at some point that bottle's going to fucking explode. It's really important to acknowledge the negative emotions that you're experiencing right now around all of the things that are outside of your sphere of control. Once you've sat with those negative emotions, once you've experienced the anger, once you've experienced the frustration, once you have sat with the fear, once you have sat with the anxiety, once you have fully experienced the feeling of helplessness and allowed it to run its course, allowed it to dissipate, you can always control how you perceive these things that are outside of your control. You can always control, I'm going to continue to perceive all of this shit that I have no control over through the lens of fear, through the lens of helplessness, through the lens of anger and frustration, through the lens of all of these negative emotions that are important for me to experience in the short term. I can hold on to those. I can brew on those negative emotions, and that's how I'm going to choose to perceive all of the shit that's outside of my control. Or you can choose to go, I feel really angry. I feel quite scared. I feel a lot of anxiety. I feel quite helpless. And those emotions are 100% justified in this situation. But you know what? I'm going to try and perceive everything that's happening that's outside of my control through the lens of, let me try and find the silver lining in these dark clouds. Let me try and find the light at the end of this dark tunnel. Let me try and perceive all of the shit that's happening outside of my control as an opportunity to do something that I never would have had the chance to do. Let me perceive all of these things that are outside of my control as, I'm going to experience positive emotions around this. I am going to experience gratitude. Now that I've dealt with the negative emotions, I am going to look at it through the lens of gratitude. I am going to look at it through the lens of opportunity. I am going to choose to perceive all of this shit in a positive light through positive emotions, rather than bottling up and brewing and hanging on to these negative emotions that I experienced in the first instance. So to tease out some of these examples, the gym situation, you can't go to the gym. Man, that's fucking bullshit. I'm really angry about that. That pisses me the fuck off. Well, you're going to brew on that? You're just going to be pissed that you can't go to the gym and you can't train? Or are you going to go, you know what? This is a really good opportunity for me to work on some body weight exercises at home while I'm in isolation, while I can't go and train. I'm going to perceive this as an opportunity. I'm going to perceive this as being able to go right back to basics with my training. And I would never have otherwise had that opportunity. You can't grow your business from a sales perspective. You know what? This is a great opportunity for me to become a better business operator, for me to go through my expenses with a fine-tooth comb and to actually improve my business profitability. And if it wasn't for the fact that I can't focus on sales right now because there's all of these disruptions happening, I would never have had the opportunity to sit down and spend the time and the effort with that fine-tooth comb. When it comes to the project that you are working on in your career that just isn't happening at the moment, you know what? I can get really pissed off about that. I was really looking forward to crushing that project in Q1. It's not going to happen. But this is a really good opportunity for me to explore different parts of the business that I would otherwise never have had the opportunity to go and work in. Perhaps this is a really good opportunity for me to develop relationships with clients or other staff members or colleagues that I just, if I was working on this project that I was supposed to crush in Q1, I wouldn't have had the opportunity, the time, the resources, the energy, and the effort to go and invest in these relationships. So I'm going to perceive this as a really good opportunity to go and do that. Your friends, your family, you can't visit them in person. Yeah, absolutely. You are entitled to be pissed about that. It's been 2 fucking years. Are you serious? We're still here going through this bullshit. You can brew on that 100%. You can be pissed. You can be angry. You can feel sad, all of these negative emotions. Or you can choose to respond in a positive way and go, you know what? Yeah, I can't spend time in person with these people who I care about. But maybe this is a great opportunity for me to do something that I wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to do for them. Maybe I can go and buy them a gift and send them something. Maybe I can write them a really nice email. Maybe I can do these things that I otherwise wouldn't have even thought of doing because I'm just focused on spending time with them. I'm focused on going to a dinner or a breakfast or whatever the situation is. So you always can control how you respond to things that are outside of your control. The third thing, effort. What I'm referring to here is effectively how much you try each and every day. You always have control over your effort. Nobody can ever take that away from you. So the question here is, are you going to let what you cannot control defeat you and wave the white flag and go, you know what? This is bullshit and I'm just going to give in and I'm just not going to try at anything. I'm just going to succumb to these negative emotions and it's just not worth me trying because I'm completely helpless and this is just a waste of fucking time. Or are you going to choose to knuckle down and move the needle forward in whatever area of life you can move the needle forward, notwithstanding all of this shit that's outside of your control? Are you going to train at home with body weight and just go through the motions because you're like, this is fucking bullshit. I can't go to the gym. Body weight's not enough weight. It's just a waste of my time and proceed with zero effort? Or are you going to give it 100% and try and do the best fucking push-ups you can possibly do, the best pull-ups you can possibly do, the best resistance band exercises you can possibly do, and even give more effort than if you had access to the gym. You can choose either. It's up to you. Those are within your control. Are you going to do a half-assed job at operating your business and going through your financials with a fine-tooth comb and trying to improve profitability because it's not really what you want to be doing? You want to be focused on the sales. You want to be focused on the top-line revenue numbers. Or are you going to get the finest tooth fucking comb you can find and drill down every single expense and pick apart every part of your business and give 120% into what you can control, which is your expenses and improving profitability? It's up to you. It's your choice. Are you going to hardly try at a new project that you've got the opportunity to go and experience in your career because it's not the project that you really wanted to be doing in Q1 2022? So you're just going to half-ass it because you can? Or are you going to go the extra mile and go, you know what, that initial project that I was supposed to be doing, I was super pumped about that. But this one is a little bit outside of what I'm used to doing, perhaps a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And you know what? I'm actually going to turn the dials up even more because this is a weakness that I'm trying to improve. Are you going to let your friends and family relationships wither away because you can't see them face to face? Or are you going to use this opportunity to double down and triple down and become a better friend and become a better brother? You become a better daughter, become a better son through doing whatever it is the fuck you can do while you can't go and spend face-to-face time with your friends and your family. Guys, execution is everything. You've heard me say that many, many times. Effort moves the needle forward. If you don't try, you're not going to get results. And you always have complete control over how much you try and how much effort you exert on a day-to-day basis. And in this situation, where so much is out of our control and so much of this shit show is just frustrating as fuck at the moment, I encourage you guys from an effort perspective to just try and win every day. Figure out from each day to each next day what a win looks like for you that day. And it's going to change. It's going to change depending on your personal circumstances. It's going to change on what the government decides the rules are tomorrow or the next day. It's going to change on what the fucking political stance is on the pandemic from one day to the next. We can all agree that things are changing pretty damn quick at the moment. But at the start of each day, figure out what a win looks like to you for that day and go and exert enough effort to put a win on the board for that day. Day by day, step by step, win by win. You always can control how much effort you exert on a day-to-day basis. And then the final thing that is always within your control is your attitude. And this is really about how you treat other people and how you treat yourself in particular. It's really got to do with how you behave. And it's really important when it comes to attitude to understand that it's okay to feel a certain way, especially when it comes to negative emotions. It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel frustrated. We go back to point 2. It's actually more than okay. It's completely necessary. You have to experience these negative emotions. You can't bottle them up. You got to allow them to run their course. You got to allow them to dissipate. You got to lean into them. It's the only way that they're going to dissipate. So it's more than okay to feel a certain way. You don't have to act that way to yourself and to people around you. Just because you feel angry, you don't need to go and be an angry prick to everyone around you. You don't need to go and be an angry prick to yourself. Just because you feel sad, you don't need to go and bring everybody else around you down to your level to help yourself make yourself feel better. You don't need to treat yourself in a sad manner. It's okay to feel these negative emotions and let them run their course and lean into them and let them dissipate. You don't have to act upon those negative emotions to the people around you and to yourself as well. And that's always within your control. And I think the best way to kind of think about this, guys, is does the way you behave, both to yourself and to the people around you, align with who you're trying to become? Or are you behaving in a way that feels good transiently in the moment because it aligns with how you're feeling at that particular point? I think if we can always try and align our behavior, how we treat others, how we treat ourselves with the sort of person that we're trying to become. Perhaps we're trying to become more empathetic. Perhaps we're trying to become a better leader. Perhaps we're trying to become a better mother, a better father, a better brother, a better sister. Who are we trying to become? Does our behavior on a day-to-day basis, how we treat other people and how we treat ourselves, align with that person who we're trying to become? Or are we just acting out because in the moment we're feeling frustrated, we're feeling sad, we're feeling pissed off, we're feeling helpless? It's okay to feel a certain way. You don't have to act that way. I think one thing that kind of ties all of this together, guys, and this is something that I have had many conversations with other people about, and many conversations internally in my own mind about as well. And this is this question of choice. You know, so much of what we've heard throughout definitely the last 12 months of the pandemic in particular, definitely throughout 2021, was, you know what, I don't have a choice, or I didn't have a choice. I, for one, am sick of hearing this I don't have a choice bullshit. And I'm just going to call it for what it is, because I think we're far enough into this pandemic now to be able to see that for what it is. And what it is when you kind of wave the white flag and you say, you know what, I didn't want to do this, but I was forced to do it because I didn't have a choice. What you're doing in that situation is you're leaning on the fact that you didn't have the choice so that you don't have to deal with the consequences. That's what it is. You're saying, it wasn't my choice, but I did it anyway because I was forced into it, because I didn't actually have a choice, because you don't have the fucking courage to actually make a decision, to own that decision, and then to deal with the consequences of that decision, whether they be good, whether they be bad, whether they be indifferent. You always have a choice. It may not be the choice that you want to make. Don't get it twisted. Sometimes you have to make choices that you otherwise wouldn't have to make. But have some fucking courage. Have some fucking courage to stand up for what you believe in, to control your controllables, to make the choices that you have the ability to make, and then have the fucking courage to deal with the consequences of those choices. I'm so fucking sick of this I don't have a choice bullshit. You always have a choice. Just stop. Stop giving that power away. Because when you own your choices, you get to own the consequences. And sometimes the consequences are going to be good. Sometimes the consequences are going to be bad. It doesn't fucking matter. What matters is that you accept responsibility for the choices you make, and you accept responsibility for the consequences of those choices, and you learn from them, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they're indifferent. By giving up that responsibility and saying, I didn't have a choice, you're giving up the ability to learn from the consequences of your choices. You're giving up the ability to learn and grow from the choices you make that don't pan out the way that you wanted them to pan out. I really can't say it any more succinctly than that. Have some fucking courage. Make your own decisions. Own your choices. Deal with the consequences and level the fuck up. The final thing here, guys. You know, I said that the start of 2022 is feeling a lot like the start of 2020. And, you know, a lot of us are experiencing that trauma response of, oh, let me step back here because last time this didn't play out so well. And we're kind of reverting back into, you know, being scared effectively of what's coming next. There's a quote that I have found myself journaling about quite frequently over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And it's a quote from a Greek philosopher called Heraclitus. And the quote is, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." If you're experiencing the same trauma response that I'm experiencing and spiraling into this thought process of this feels a lot like 2020, this is going to play out the same, because the next step is this is going to play out the same way as 2020, and we're going to be doing the same shit that we did 2 years ago. It's important to really objectively understand that this is not 2020. This is not the same. And most importantly, you are not the same. You're not the same person you were 2 years ago. You've been through almost 2 years of a 1 in 100 year pandemic, and you fucking made it. You made it. You're here. It's not the same river. It's not the same pandemic. It's not the same stage of the pandemic. So much has changed. We have so much more information. So many decisions have been made, some good, some bad. It's not the same river. And you are not the same man or the same woman. You've grown, you've developed, you've learned so many lessons over the last couple of years. And as much as the trauma response tries to pull you back in and says, we've been here before, we know how this is going to play out, this is not a good situation, you need to get the fuck away from this as quickly as possible. I encourage you guys to anchor back into this Heraclitus quote, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and you are not the same man or woman." Guys, you could have been anywhere in the world right now, but you're here with me. I appreciate that. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Fitness Times Business Podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. And if you enjoyed this episode and took some value from it, make sure you share it with your friends, your family, and your followers. And if you haven't yet, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating.